Welcome to another episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. Have you ever thought about selling your business one day? Well, this is the episode for you. Or perhaps you want to license your IP for your super successful Kickstarter game. This is also the episode for you. We get into the weeds here, but there's lots of helpful information that I know you're going to find helpful. Let's get into it.
Game begin.
Let's go.
I used to be a marketer like you until I took an arrow to the knee.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I am joined as always by Sean and not Rick. Instead of Rick this week, we have a business broker by the name of Bryan Gonzales, who is here to chat about running your business with excellence. So welcome to the show, Bryan.
Hey, thank you, Andrew and Sean. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited because on this episode, we plan on talking about so the concept of running a business with excellence. Your end game is to sell a business, is to help somebody sell their business and, you know, kind of golden parachute out or silver parachute. I don't know. But the idea is every business is going to end in one of two ways. Either it's going to be, you know, and there's never a business that goes on forever, right? It either gets sold or it gets shut down. And I've seen both, you know, in my history. And I think that the aim of this podcast isn't necessarily, this particular podcast episode isn't necessarily to help people to sell their businesses, although that is what you can help with. And maybe we'll dive into that, but it's to run businesses with excellence, because I would much rather see people sell their businesses than just shut them off. And you know, at the end of the day, right? We're all working towards something. We all kind of envision 5 years from now, we're going to be further ahead than we were, you know, in the past. Our future selves are going to be more successful than our past selves and in a better position financially and all of the other elements of life. But it's not always the case. But so what I really wanted to talk about is how to run the business with excellence today to prepare for that future. And so that's really where I thought you would be a perfect person to chat on this topic.
Well, I appreciate that, Andrew. I have seen a lot of it, you know, in many different forms, from entrepreneurs to business owners to founders. I have some pieces of paper on the wall. So one of them says MBA. And there's a couple things that you want to keep in mind, you know, that initially come to mind when you talk about running a business with excellence. You know, you kind of hit on the sense of, you know, you're either going to shut down or you're going to, or sell it. Right. And, you know, I was taught in an early age and reinforced in the MBA that in business, you're either growing or dying, you know, and I think that that's important to realize. As an operational point, I think it's also important to realize that because you're either going to sell it or shut it down, you do need to start to some degree with the end in mind. You know, you should have a goal and maybe you have a sales goal, but what happens when you reach it? What happens when you get there? You know, it's tough to become, you know, to reach your goals. It's tougher to stay there and to reach more, right? So to some degree, I think that operating a business with excellence means that you do need to know where you're going with it. And that inherently requires that you have some sort of end in mind.
I think another thing to keep in mind is having maybe a contingency plan, because maybe once you're on top of the mountain, the view isn't as great as you think it is. And maybe, you know, running a business, you sort of romanticized. And when you actually get to that stage where you have this profitable business, you actually don't enjoy it. You don't like what you're doing. Maybe it's a bit all too consuming. So having a strategy in place in which you can transition or get out of there and do something else, it might be worth considering as well. Is that something that you often encounter with your clients? You often just find people who are like, well, this wasn't what I thought it would be, and I'm ready to sell.
Yeah, you know, that's going to happen, Sean. I mean, that's kind of the idea, right, of having the end in mind. I mean, what's the end? You can say that the end is defined by reaching that point. You know, most business owners in the world at some point, maybe once a year, maybe once a day, maybe once a month, they're kind of like, well, not sure I want to do this anymore. It might be money related, it might be personal related, but what are we going to do now? Right. And if you don't have some sort of idea of where you're going, then you're going to be stuck in the circumstance of no plan. And then you're going to be, where are you financially? What's the valuation? Those types of things. So again, you kind of want to think about what's the end game, whether that's an exit, selling the business, whether that's, transferring it to a family member, but you do need to kind of think that out, because one thing we know for sure is that you're going to get tired of it in one way or another.
What do you think about?
Go ahead.
Sorry, Andrew, for jumping in. Do you ever recommend that people don't sell their business and that they just stop? Because there's probably an element of legacy as well, especially if your name is sort of associated with something. You might not want to risk someone else, taking on your brand or continuing your legacy, and then
maybe kind of a little bit of pride
running
there,
it to the ground,
not wanting to shut off.
Sorry,
maybe even a little bit of pride too.
Possibly.
I think that having a legacy, I think that as people age, I think the legacy becomes less about, what you did and more about what you can get or what you can give to your family. And, so it sounds good. And just to dummy it down, when you're ready to wrap up and you had a good, successful run, it's kind of like, well, if I stop now, then I'm kind of going to make it a legend. And, or I did a good job and no one can ruin it. But the reality is that I see once you mature, maybe personally or as a business owner, you want the money for it. I mean, just to be frank, and it's not so much about what the next person's going to do with it. Now, if you make a brand that is enormous, like an Amazon, something that's unfathomable, well, that Mattel, what have you, that might be a little different, but you're still going to want to get paid for it. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. I find there's this mentality when a business is successful, there are going to be people that will, contact you sometimes out of nowhere and offer to buy it. And even sometimes when a business is not super successful but has momentum, meaning not super like financially profitable, financially successful, and obviously, this business is going places necessarily, but just has like momentum. I've had people reach out to me to invest in Deliverance as a project. I've had the offer to purchase Next Level Web. I mean, just this most recent year, I had somebody ask to purchase my company so that I could work full time for them and our staff would work full time for them in their with their kind of handful of ventures that they're working on. And I think that as regardless of our financial position, it's not unhealthy, but we're still growing and bootstrapping and everything, just like all the other small businesses out there, I think. But when you get more maybe name recognition, or so you see, people get to see some external momentum, then you'll get people interested in that. And I had one client one time that was, they're constantly courted with, they have, I guess, they make like between 10 and $30 million a year as a company. And they constantly get courted by larger organizations to purchase them. And they told me, they had like a pretty significant offer. Everything always comes with strings attached though. And, it's not just like, hey, I'll give you, so many millions of dollars to get out. It's like, they want you to work for so many years, and then they want you to, if things go bad, then they're going to get all that money back from you and leave you with an empty, a shell of a business and there are a lot of sketchy things that these larger investment groups do to kind of, so that it doesn't work out perfectly. But, so with this particular client, there were other reasons to turn down those offers. But, one of the things that they said to me was, why would we let someone else buy the business when we could just grow it ourselves and then sell it for twice as much? The momentum is there and we have the vision and the path forward and all of that. This is definitely, they're playing at a much larger level than I am. I mean, our marketing company, most of our clients, we have half of our business in SEO marketing. About half of our clients are bigger than us. They need to be bigger than us, if they're bringing on a marketing agency to do stuff, I mean, they're probably, so they're not going to typically, on that end, they're not startups. But I just thought that was really interesting where the answer to like, why, like, we're not going to sell it because we can just grow it ourselves and profit instead. It reminded me of the hen that baked the bread, and no one wanted to help or something. So she's like, we're going to eat it. I don't know. Just, it was a really curious experience. I was like, if it were me, like, I would love to have that much money, and I don't know why you would not jump for it. At some part of me is like, man, that's like a lot. Like, you would be set for life. But then when you're in the midst of it and able to push harder for another, 2 to 3 years and then sell for much more, I mean, that was kind of their mentality. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think that there's, I think that they're running a play there. They think that they can get some money now. It sounds like a lot of money, but they also think, probably from their hard work and research, that if they keep getting wins, that they could double it. And they're probably right. The question becomes if. That's the risk, right? Because as you know, things don't necessarily work out as planned.
Right.
And that's the idea. Because, and when you think about it, in anything in life, especially in business, you're going to run certain plays, right? I'm an athlete. I'm going to talk about play. I'm going to analogize the sports the whole time. And some of them work and some of them don't, right? Now, if you have this company, this company you were talking about, and the founders or the owners or the decision makers were starting to tire of it, but they had a really solid plan, I think their decision would have taken a little bit longer. So I think that, there's personal reasons, medical, the wife or this, the real CEO of the world doesn't like it. Stuff like that, your children, you have to move, parental care. There's all these things that come in personally that would affect a decision like that, because, and therefore, hey, I don't want to take that risk, even though it's a calculated and the odds are in my favor. It's just, I'm going to take the money and run. And it's like The Price is Right, right? Do you want the money now or do you want to bet it on, or do you want to bet it all, and that's kind of, and so where you're at in life. But yeah, I see that. And, the reality is that there are just as many, the only ones you hear about are the stories where that person took that risk and they're successful. You rarely hear about the majority of those people who do never get an offer like that again. And that's important to remember, because they don't write about those people. They only write about the people that actually took the risk and made it. And they're one of, it's one in a million. You got to be careful, and that's at my age, I'm not saying I'm old, 53. I'm going to take the money, frankly. You know what I mean? Frankly, I'm going to take the money.
So we all play with two currencies, I feel, and one of them is money and the other one's time, and you can't get time back. And sometimes you can trade time. You can trade time for money, but it's rare to be able to trade money for more time, right? And I think that, in the end, they say all of the best things in life, they don't cost money. You can't really buy them, love and family and friends and experiences and other things like that. But yeah, it is curious, I find sometimes I've seen it like you're talking about, where people get a little too greedy and they end up not selling, and then they end up kind of shutting down. So we've worked on, excluding our crowdfunding nerd stuff, which we've worked with about 175 Kickstarter campaigns, or GameFound campaigns, but excluding that, I've worked for over 800 other businesses, well over 800, just over the course of, I guess it's been 14 years that we've been in business, about that long. And it's a really strange thing to see when they get an offer that wasn't as much as they thought it was worth. Now, the problem I think that we should talk about is how much you think it's worth, how much you believe you should get paid because you worked so hard on this thing. That actually has very little relation sometimes to what somebody is willing to offer you for the thing. And sometimes I think, like I mentioned pride earlier, hubris maybe is a better word for it. I don't know, but you're like, I put so much into this and I'm selling it for an amount that is, or, they're offering me an amount that's well below what I think I deserve, for all of this time and hard work and effort and energy. I like for myself, like when I looked at that offer, it was, they offered me, like I try to be open on Crowdfunding Nerds. I hope you guys don't think I'm like for all our listeners, I hope you guys value my openness and my transparency because I'm about to give you some numbers here. But they offered me $125,000 to hand them over the reins of the business. That's just cash to deposit into my bank account. And I would have a job that I would make $125,000 a year, with a vested, over the course of like 5 years, I would kind of regain 10% of the equity of the company or so. And then I'd have another 10% of the equity of the company that I could hand out to key employees and things like that. I looked at it and I thought, this is cool. Like I could put in like a metal building for a garage that I really want, on our property. And I'd actually have a garage for our cars and maybe a workout room and whatever. And maybe I could add like a fence to the front of the property or something. That'd be cool. And I realized, I would look at this metal building, like after I sold this thing, it's like, I would look at this metal building and say, I gave my company away for this metal building. Like, I hope it was worth it, and this, and now I'm an employee working for someone else and, that they could, and it was guaranteed employment for 5 years, it's like the thing, but I'm sure that I'm not like the most educated human out there, but I'm sure that there are ways around some of this stuff. Like if I'm not performing all of my duties to the right, whatever if I'm not hitting all the benchmarks perfectly, like maybe it can just terminate me. And then I'm like, I have a metal building and also a mortgage to pay and no job or whatever. But I just thought, at the end of the day, what does this get me? If I sold this, I would have to go start something from like, I would have to start from the ground up again if I wanted to grow, or I would then have, be thrust into a typical job market or, other things like that. And I just thought, it is money and they like money, but it doesn't really give me something. Like what I have right now is stability, and I am young enough that I can continue to work
and flexibility.
And autonomy with my schedule and whatnot, like that supports all of the things I do, including all of the children I have and all of the, the Deliverance is a project, it's right now, it's just a very expensive hobby for me, at least. And other things like that, those are things I'm passionate about. And Next Level Web and Crowdfunding Nerds is really the thing that enables all of those things to function. And I'm in charge of that. I can run it straight into the ground. I'm fully capable of running it straight into the ground, but it just seemed like it wasn't worth it for me.
Yeah. Well, it's a moment in time and you have to kind of decide at that moment, right? I think your cost benefit analysis is a moment in time based on that offer. When you were explaining it, the first thing that came to mind is counter offer. Okay. And then the next thing that came to my mind is, get somebody like me or someone that's seasoned and able to at least advise you, because maybe we could have got, if they're doing 5 years at 125, we're talking about, 625 plus the 125. So the just to use your math, I think the total package is 750. So it's kind of like, well, I'll take 500, maybe I'm taking 250 in cash, 250 in equity. And then I'll agree to a employment contract, for 1 year at 125. But if I bolt, I get another 125, something of that nature, where you start trying to plan it so that you could jump ship if you decided to do it. Personally, what if you were like, hey, maybe you have stability in your model, but let's say you didn't. And, some people are seeking a paycheck, right? And if you were in that situation, then we try to renegotiate it to get to a point where you're, you get a lump sum and a paycheck, right? And maybe some equity. So I think it depends on that. But I think the important part there is to reach out to discuss it, because, clearly they're interested. We always say no to the first pencil, right? I mean, that's the way it goes. And,
It's like
and
The
then
Office.
you
I
need
reject your
people
first
that,
offer.
yeah,
What's your second offer?
yeah. You of course not, but you don't tell them that. And then reach out, because there are people out there, all on me, that are sitting around, I don't want to say sitting around, but, you're 27 as a business owner, a business broker, a business lawyer, right? And my dad gave me a promissory note when I was 12. The deal structure and negotiation and interest rates and equity and all of that, at 53. So that was 40, I can't even do the math, 39 years ago. It's something that was a part of my upbringing and my education and experience. So there are people out there like me that will, immediately think, okay, let's start strategizing a little bit, because maybe there is a way that we can kind of make it worth your while. But, if it's not, you're young, you have good ideas, you have traction, you have more wins than losses. Sure. Yeah. Why am I going to give this up? You have autonomy, so, so we could probably sweeten that deal. Don't know if you wanted some semblance of it.
Yeah. And that's, what I told the guy was that, it doesn't make any sense. I know. Triple your offer. Now, I actually told him, look, this is my mortgage that I have to pay every month. And if I, unless I pay this off in full, it's just not even worthwhile for me to consider it, because I have the same expenses. And, it just, at this point, I would rather continue to work and maintain this autonomy and all of that, and it was something that I felt like, what if he did that though? And I thought, even if he did, I think that where I'm at in life today, I feel that I don't think I would be ahead. I just think I would be changing my situation. I would be, make some money here and there, but I'd have the same stressors as everybody else. I have bills to get paid. It might be $2,000 a month less than before, but I've got, significant bills that are, my family still needs to eat, and we have property taxes and all of that. And, what we're doing now is working. So I don't know. It's just like rocking the boat was a big question mark. And then on top of that, I really thought about my team, like Sean and Rick and all of the other people that were part. And I thought, number one, I wanted to make sure that they were taken care of, but their employment was kind of the continued employment was a thing that was relevant, to the buyer. He wanted to keep the team in place and everything. But I thought, I worked so hard to put that team together. It just, they fell into place in the right ways and that sort of thing, and to lose all of that would be, a big loss, for the ventures that I'm on right now. So I don't know. It was maybe it's a bad move. Maybe it's a great move.
I
I'm
think
okay with
it's
it.
your move, right? And
Yeah.
I want to make sure that, you realize that, that sounds good, Andrew. Like, that's very nice way to put it. I agree with you, but in reality, everybody has a price, including you and your employees. whether that price is just money or time or equity, employment contracts to continue, a golden parachute, those types of things, right? But, there is a price, right? And so, I think that's important to point out, because you have a subjective value, a labor of love for whatever it is, the attributes of what you have now, right? But you also are a person that creates ideas. You're also a person that could create another one. And if you could swan song your baby here and come out with a chunk of money and an investment money to start your next project, that would be the kind of price that I would see with someone like you. It is possible. And then as far as employees, they are critical. I'm a big believer in employee satisfaction is customer satisfaction. I mean, just put it that way. But with that said, in my line of work, when I see a transition of a new owner, so to speak, I see employees transition out, and it really comes down to a moment or a day where they're, hey, I'm leaving. I've sold it. This is a new owner. And there's a little bit of sadness, but most sellers are amazed at how quickly that their employees say, hey, they look at, like, nice knowing you, Andrew. And I'm just dumbing it down. Nice knowing you, Andrew. Hey, Bryan, am I going to get my same pay and same time off? The reality is that we're all kind of loyal to our situation at home, which relates to our pay and time off. Right. And so I was always amazed. It happened to me early, I would say in my 20s when I sold my first company. And I was like, I have these relationships, I have like an auntie and a grandma here, they love me. They didn't love me. They didn't love me that much. They called me a couple times, but at the end of the day, they're more focused on what they get from it. But with that said, I mean, I'm still friends, and that kind of thing, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one thing I'd like to jump into, maybe change gears a little bit. Let's say we're in a situation where someone wants to sell their business. What are the types of things that buyers are looking for? And what are some of the reasons are they buying a business? Is it to acquire your audience? So they might, just buy your audience and then shut your business down. Are they purchasing you because you're a competitor? They just don't want to. I think it was John D. Rockefeller who said competition is a sin. So they could just be buying you out so that they don't want to deal with the competition. And then maybe the other question off the back of that is, when you're selling your business, do you just wait for someone to come to you, or is there a marketplace somewhere where you can, say, hey, I've got this business, I want to sell it? Well, how do you even go about selling your business? So I suppose the first question is, what elements does your business need to have to be sellable? And then number two is, where would you sell it?
Well, I think that, along the lines of a buyer's perspective on the first question, it's very difficult to gain market share in most industries, right? So you expand by acquisition, right? I can build a certain customer list, but, for whatever geographical limits or whatever your limits are, you can't really add to that. And how are you supposed to compete? So that's why you have companies acquiring other ones, because you get their audience, right? Now, and sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it's a location, sometimes it's a product, sometimes it's an audience, sometimes it's suppliers, sometimes it's buyers contracts that are in there. Those are of value to people. A lot of buyers think that they're better than sellers. They can do it better than you, right? So you might not have done it very well, or you might be breaking even or whatever, but you have, certain amount of people that have bought your product, and so they want to grab that audience. So you're kind of hitting it on the head. But there's a lot of motivations why, but those are the primary ones. They see some sort of value with their existing operation, or they see that they can bring value. And that kind of boils down to that they think they can do a better job with it. And I have to tell sellers that I work with to let them think that this isn't a battle of egos. We're trying to sell your business. This is why we're working together, right? You made that decision. So let's not take too much ownership on, over that, take the dive, in other words, and realize that let the buyer think what he wants. If they want to have an ego, is what it is. Okay. So what do you do? Well, it kind of relates to what we kind of started with, and that first question is that buyers don't buy on potential. They're not buying at what could potentially happen. Buyers are going to buy, 99.9% because of revenue and net profit, right? They're going to buy because of revenue and net profit, minus an extraordinary invention, that hasn't been tapped into or something of that nature. But, 99.9%, it's revenue and net profit. So not potential. So then what do we got to do? We have to make sure that this, another thing I think that relates is that people ask me is, when's it a good time to sell? There's only one good time to sell. It's when you're doing well, because then you're going to have more revenue and net, right? Otherwise, it's a fire sale, right? Then it's a fire sale, if that makes sense. So you kind of, the example that Andrew brought up, it was, he was doing well. That's the time to sell. So then that leans back. What should you do to prepare to sell? I think that's important to remember, because no one's going to buy it if it's a fire sale, if it's not making money generally, right? So you have to kind of have some semblance of a roadmap of where you're going, right? And you have to be measuring along the way, if that makes sense, right? Because you can't just, I want to sell it. It takes an average of 6.5 months to sell a business. If you're desperate, it's not going to sell. The buyer pool isn't so big like a house or an apartment. That's shelter. Everybody needs that. Not everybody needs to buy your business in your industry and has the money to do it and the time to run it, right? So you have a shallow buyer pool. So you have to prepare it in that sense that you have to try to run it to maximize the revenue and the net. Finally, is that when you decide that when you decide that you want to sell, or maybe before, let me go back to that, is that reach out to people that so people like me, even business brokers. Well, they'll look at your business. Many of us do complimentary and confidential valuations, and we can kind of see what's going on, and then talk to you a little bit, and then say, okay, this is where you're at here, but if we can raise the sales, lower the expenses somehow, we can get into the particulars of that, in those moments, that your business is going to have a better value in a year, where's the economy going? So you want to enlist people, a good time before you actually sell it, and you want to get those valuations and get those discussions. So that's part of how you sell it, right? So how would I sell a business, or where would I sell it? Well, I would consult a broker or someone that can value your business. And then I would see if it's a good time to sell it, so to speak, that, this is about the best I'm going to do, or in the next year, I'm not going to be able to increase it by 5 or 10%. So let's start now. And then I would hire a broker, because, you need to keep running the business, your sanity, but also so that you can maintain the revenue and the net. Because no one's going to come along when buyers come along, they're going to come along and say, hey, give me 3 years of financials, and then give me your 12 months trailing profit and loss. That means the last 12 months, your profit and loss statement, your income and expenses, right? Because you're only as good as last month generally, right? And so you have to expect that coming out. So that requires that you're running your business normally, because you need to maximize the revenue and the net, because most people don't buy on potential, right? So you want to use a broker or some sort of expert to get them in there to do an initial valuation, so that you can figure out whether you can increase the performance, and you have the time to do that. If you can't increase it too much, well, then you put it up for sale. When you put it up for sale, you have to keep operating the business. You need to trust people that are in this business, so that they can prepare the marketing, the package, the profile, the listing, those types of things. They can basically do their job. They can do the marketing. They can vet buyers. They can negotiate, do the contracting, manage the escrow, figure out how the buyer's going to structure it with loans and stuff like that. We know we could all do these things, right? you could do those things, but you're going to get into a do-it-yourself model, and your performance of your business is going to go down. If the performance of your business is going to go down, it's going to be reflected on a 12-month trailing profit and loss, the immediate last 12 months. You're going to get a lower price. It's really that simple. Again, 6.5 months average to sell a business, right? It's not going
Great.
to sell overnight.
And then would you compile a proposal or a slideshow? How does the sale pitch usually sort of manifest itself? Is it something that you prepare like this, booklet that you hand to someone? Do you have like a face-to-face meeting?
I mean, generally you consult with a broker, and then we start with a confidential complimentary valuation, and then we review it. We have to make sure we're on the same page. I get people coming to me saying, "Hey, I need $1 million," and the valuation's at 100,000. I'm not that broker that's going to list it. After 27 years, I just, I don't take anything that walks in the door. But conversely, I also have people that come in and say, "I need 100,000 and it's worth $1 million." We're leaving money on the table. So we want to start with that valuation so that we are on the same page. Me, my office, and a seller, right? Assuming that's good and the financials are in order, then we kind of the seller has to determine a price, an asking price out of the gate. That seems to be legitimate. We'll take the listing, go through a listing agreement, and then we build the offering, which means a little bit of homework for the seller, but, kind of more the nuts and bolts. How much is your inventory? How much is your furniture, fixtures, and equipment? Are we going to include those things? Do you have any receivables? Those types of questions. We kind of get it to where the offering makes sense with the valuation, right? And we look up some businesses and see if they're kind of doing the same thing in the same area, that kind of stuff. So some comps. We put that into a listing, and then we also build a confidential business profile. Basically, the listing is everything about your business except the name of it, and I don't want to say everything about it, but it gives you more of the top line numbers, maybe a couple lease terms, what you do, what area you do it in, maybe some sales figures. That's what we get people to buy it on, whether we're contacting them or whether we do post it at certain places. And, when people hit on those or respond to those, then we're going to send them a non-disclosure agreement. It's going to ask, where do you live? What's your email? How many funds do you have available? Right? We get that back. We vet it. We look up the address. We look at the domain ending of the email address. We have to make sure that these people are legit, because there are people just kind of wasting time, right? So we're trying to screen those for our sellers. Most people pass muster, and if they do with that, then we'll countersign the NDA and we'll send them the confidential business profile. That's 4 to 6 slides that are very much more telling. It's going to name the business. We never name the seller, but it's going to name the business. And it's going to show them some pictures and additional data, maybe a lease terms, maybe some loan terms, stuff like that. At that point, if they're interested more, then we usually ask for proof of funds. And when I mean interest, if a buyer's interested more, they either want to talk to you or visit or get even more information. At that point, we ask for some sort of bank statement that's going to show that this is possible, whether it's a down payment with a bank or whether it's, they can buy it cash. At that point, we provide the information or the interview or the visit, and then we get to, are we ready to do a letter of intent or we want to make an offer? And we get into that contracting, and there's some contingencies in there. And then once that's done, you close escrow, you get your money, you have a transition meeting. I'm giving it to you in a very compact way. There's a lot more to it. It's not necessarily, it's similar. The cadence is similar to maybe buying or selling a house, but it's not the same because we're dealing with so many intangibles, your phone number, your brand, all intangible assets, the valuation, we're dealing with a lot more attributes and a lot more numbers. We're also dealing with buyers. A lot of buyers may not know how to structure their acquisition, right? So as you'd imagine, I have a ton of bankers all over me. And just, I've educated myself with them. And so I work with the buyers, whether to help them structure it, to work with bankers, talk them off the ledge, or I talk sellers off the ledge too. So that's kind of what we do in a nutshell. That's how you would do it. Enlist help use the experts, don't do it yourself, run your business, try to grow it so that people see the real value in it. Right.
Yeah, I would say one other thing that, especially with board game companies and other product based businesses, the intellectual properties that they have are probably one of the things worth an intangible amount of money, because if like we saw recently this month, we had Mythic Games sold a couple of different properties, or maybe it was earlier in January. Mythic Games sold a couple of properties to Simon, which are two companies. They sold a couple of their intellectual properties, some of which had yet to be delivered, and because it looked like they were going to default on their commitment to deliver the product, and Simon elected to buy that for an undisclosed amount and fulfill all of the backers that had purchased. Although it wasn't the original thing that they backed, it was at least something. So they figured out what they could afford, and they fulfilled, or they're going to fulfill something to each of those backers. And I find that that's really interesting. I've had people asked to buy the Deliverance intellectual property before. It was actually, after Kickstarter, when we made a good amount, it's like $314,000 for our first project, we had a company reach out to purchase, and they just wanted the IP. They wanted to purchase the IP for a flat amount, because they saw they had a vision that they could take it a lot further, and they're well connected, and so on and so forth. Also, I see companies like you mentioned, this thing happens by acquisition, and for all the people listening to this, I find for myself, I don't know about you guys, but I find that it seems kind of pie in the sky in so many different ways, and maybe even not relevant to me when you might think that when you're talking about, the business and how people might come to you to acquire your products and whatnot. But Asmodee, for example, or Asmodee, I don't know how you say it. They eat a lot of companies. I mean, there are companies out there that get acquired by Asmodee or Asmodee or whatever. Ravensburger is another company that acquires, and there are a lot of companies that acquire based on intellectual properties, where they say, I see this product, we would like to add this as a portfolio in our line that we could expand. And, if your game does something interesting, or if your product does something interesting, then there will be companies that have a vision for what they can do with it. So there's this kind of intangible amount, in addition to bank statements and, like the 12 years profit and loss, 3 years taxes, other things like that. There are companies that will say, I want this, intellectual property. For, I don't know, random example, Jamie Stegmaier's Wingspan. There are a lot of companies that would probably be interested to take that IP and just run with it, because it's proven very successful, and maybe Asmodee would be able to, expand that further and get into different markets, and they just have more people. So they're going to be able to make higher amounts of revenue with that. And, it would complement their machine very well, and so those are certain things that are a lot more common in the board game space, or really product based space.
Yeah, it reminds me. When I first became a lawyer, I was a music licensing lawyer, right? And back in '97, and it reminds me of songwriters, because that's basically what I was doing. I was handling licenses, and it's it kind of sounds like that. You have people that are making money off of writing songs and selling the songs. They don't perform them; they just wrote them. It's amazing. So it sounds like that. So absolutely, their companies get to a point, and people get to a point where there's just nothing left in the tank to create. So I need to get these creators in here. That's not what they do. Maybe they're the singers of the world. They're not, or the performers of the world, but they're not the writers of, right? Think of it in those terms. So where am I going to find these writers? And in analogy, what you're saying is that, hey, we have kind of spent all our creative talent here. There's no more thoughts. We need some ideas, or we need to, and then, okay, let's get them. Let's buy them, or let's buy that property from them. Right.
And Bryan, is that something that you could help businesses with? Let's say that someone was to come to Andrew and say, "Hey, Andrew, I want to buy a license of the Deliverance product because I think this would make a really cool miniatures war game. So I want to just, issue a license with you." Is that something that you could help negotiate
Oh,
and sort of
absolutely.
secure?
Absolutely. Yeah. And just from that experience, when I was listening to Andrew, he was talking about selling that property, right? And instantly in my mind, it's like, well, why sell it? Why don't you just license it? It's a gift that keeps on giving, right?
So when Netflix comes to me for a special, then I talk to you, right?
Absolutely. I did TV and film too, if you really want to know, in the late 90s. So yeah, but yeah, you always want to try for the license. You can exert some control over it and you kind of get it back. And in fact,
they expire.
Yeah. In fact,
that's what George Lucas should have done.
Expire. That's how you kind of get it. But, and you can do hybrids, all that stuff, but absolutely. There's only a few things you can do with a piece of property: buy, sell, or license it. There's nothing else, whether it's intangible or tangible. And then a house, a lawn, whatever you want to call it. There's only 3 things you can do it. You could destroy it, I guess. But, business wise, buy, sell, or license. There's no in between. So it's relatively easy. And most of the intellectual property of the world is licensed. Very rarely do you have a complete sale. And that could be perpetual life. There could be a 50-year license, stuff like that. But, and a lot of the people that are these inventors of board games, from my understanding, there are families out there that created, is it Scrabble? I think that was a family game, or Yahtzee, one of those two. They're still making money off that. There's still licensed there.
Richard Garfield with Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, I knew a guy that made a transition. I don't call it, but it's where the shin goes to the foot for a ski boot. Right? It's a design, right? And it's a piece of plastic that folds a certain way, just the flexibility. He's been making money off that for 20 years. He gets $1 or $2 per pair of boots sold for forever. That's a great one. You know what I mean? That's a great one. Yeah. Those things happen all the time.
Yeah. And then when it comes to selling businesses, are there any things which are red flags? For example, debts. Is that sort of just a big no-no that you can't really sell a business if you're in debt? Or can you sell your debts on? How does that work?
Well, it's very rare that there's 2 types of sales. There's a stock sale and an asset sale. A stock sale is when you're actually buying the entity, the corporation or the LLC. And when you do that, you're absorbing all the liabilities of that, right? So such as a debt, right? And no one really, that's not very popular in selling businesses. Don't think like these huge, Google buying YouTube. We're not talking about that. We're talking about more Main Street, me and you type things, right? So, basically it's very, very, very rare that, think 1 in 1,000 that someone's going to do a stock sale for a sale of a business under 5 million. They don't want your corporation. They got their own relationships. They got their own systems, their own vendors. They certainly don't want your liabilities. So the other type of sale is called an asset sale, which is kind of, your DBA, your fictitious business name statement, your phone number, your website, your intellectual property, maybe your equipment, your inventory, those types of things. So those are much more common in, at our level. So they're all asset sales. And, you make it easy, if that makes sense. And that way you can carry your debt with you. And basically, if I'm selling to you, Sean, I'm going to sell to, I have a debt of 50 cents. I'm selling you for $1. You give me the $1. I give you all this property. And then I use that $1 and pay off my debt on my time. It's my own thing.
Now, there's one other thing that I wanted to bring up, which is something that I have found. It can be kind of embarrassing to share numbers and to even begin the process. Is that a common thing? It's really easy when you're making tons of money and you're super profitable and you can be super proud of the numbers that you can put forth. That's kind of the mindset I would figure, would make it easy to sell or to talk to a business broker and say, yeah, you want to see 3 years of my taxes? Check it out, or whatever. But I would wager to say that there's something to be embarrassed about with every single sale. Every business owner is not going to be in a place where they're like, we crush it and I have nothing to hide. But like maybe, can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that that's something that I've felt, like I don't know if it's going to be a good thing if I show these 3 years of taxes, like we lost money for 2 of them or whatever. Is that something that you encounter on a regular basis? Like maybe something that stops somebody from working with you that should just pull the trigger and,
No, when you say prevent from working with me, no, I think that's the reason why they seek me out, because what I'm marketing for my services is a complimentary and confidential evaluation, which is a reality check, right? And so like I'm on your side, I'm your broker, right? And so there has to be some sort of trust developed there, and that's why we kind of start with evaluation, because we want to make sure we're on the same page. I've done evaluation and there's absolutely no value. I probably do, 3 to 5 a week. And I'd say one of those is no value. It's not going to work, right? No matter how much subjective value you say it is, I'm not going to be able to sell this, right? It's not going to work. So I have those conversations often. And, the other kind I have is that, well, they're breaking even, right? But they're pulling out a lot of money for themselves, right? And that's what makes them break even. Well, there's different types of multiples, not just a net profit multiple. There's also a revenue multiple, right? There's also what they call the seller's discretionary earnings multiple. So I'm finding the justification that I would be talking to a potential buyer and saying, well, they're not breaking even. I said, well, he's pulling 600,000 out. If he didn't pull that out, to pay for his new garage or whatever you said, the new steel structure on your lawn, Andrew, and the health insurance and the cell phone and the Costco runs and the Staples runs, then you would have 600 of net profit, right? Sometimes sellers don't even realize that. They don't know there's more than one multiple. They don't understand that we can build value through equipment or through what they're pulling out of the business, or that some people are just looking for revenue, right? Because with a lot of zeros, you can float things for a long time as we restructure the expenses. So that's why we start with evaluation. And when you start listening to this, right, you're like, oh, okay, maybe I do want to hear this, because you don't know what you don't know, And so the idea is, hey, I couldn't really, there are some brokers out there that charge money for valuations, which is just beyond me, because how do you get into the conversation to begin with to try to establish the trust, the relationship? You pay me this and I'll do evaluation. I just say, hey, let me see your P&Ls for a few years. Let me run it and let's chat about it, because I don't want you as a client if you have unrealistic expectations, or and people like that, and that's how you kind of operate. That's how we kind of operate.
That's
So
awesome.
Bryan,
Yeah.
I'll add one thing before you hop in, Sean. The just more of a comment than anything is that one of the first things that I was asked was by the person looking to buy our company was, how much do I pay myself? And that was an immediate like, okay, it actually makes more money than it generates, if without his salary it generates more, and something I didn't really think about initially, that there's even if we're breaking even, or we had, I want to say in 2022 we had a $2,000 net loss or something. It's like that would actually be a lot higher and would be net income if my salary wasn't factored in or whatever. So I thought that was an interesting point of information.
That's right. So. That's right. People are trying to become you by buying your business. They want to know how they're going to live off of it.
Yeah.
And so we got to tell them, this is, you get a steel structure on your lawn and, the whole 9 yards. You can use it for whatever, for one of your yards,
Awesome.
That's kind of the idea.
I'm holding off until I get to build a steel structure on my lawn with a sky bridge to my house.
There you go.
So
prefab. Yeah. That's all I got to tell you. Prefabricated. Cheaper.
So Bryan, what if someone is listening to this podcast right now and they've got a huge IP that's very successful, it's got a lot of brand recognition, and they're wanting to license and see if someone else will carry the torch, so to speak. How can they get in contact with you? What's the best way to reach out to you?
Well, I'll give you my confidential, just confidential. I'll give you my my credentials, but I want to point out that I love to talk shop, and a purpose in my life is really the most important purpose is to help people. And I know that sounds a little corny, but it is a cornerstone of how I operate day in and day out. So please call or write me. Be happy to chat with you for a while. I have forms and stuff like that that are automated where I could kind of get, you could enter information on your time, but please call me or write me. And again, we offer complimentary and confidential evaluations and consultations. So my name is Bryan Gonzales. My email is B as in boy, G as in girl. My name's not boy girl. It's Bryan Gonzales, right? So BG at, and then it's called the verdadfirm.com. So that would be V as in Victor, ER, D as in dog, A, D as in dog, F as in Frank, IR, M as in Mary.com. So BG at Verdad. Some people call it Verdad. BG at verdadfirm.com. Or you can call me on my cell phone, which I love, and I answer on nights and weekends and holidays, and I respond when I'm available. 619-777-6884. That's 619-777-6884.
And that's a one international. If somebody had wanted to, that's a US based number.
Yeah, it's a Google number too. So we're gonna screen you and
Awesome.
make sure say something like, I heard you on the podcast, or I heard you here, or I know Andrew, or I know Sean, or something like that. It'd be helpful, right? But I honestly and earnestly love talking shop. I just love it. My whole life is a deal structure. It's been helping people. So put it that way.
That's awesome. Well, for my part, it's been super educational and informative. I loved having you on this podcast. And, we every once in a while we venture away from marketing to business. I mean, these things matter to the people that listen. And I just want to thank you for your time and expertise, because it was very apparent to me the expertise that you had, and I learned a lot myself.
Great. No problem. Well, I really appreciate this opportunity to share my knowledge with everybody. I hope that you and Sean and everybody that's going to listen to this or is listening, have a wonderful day, and feel free to please contact me.
All right. Well, then we're going to have Robot Richard send us out.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.